Welcome to Inside the Indians, your source for insider information on the Tribe. Stay with us as we bring you the latest about the players, managers, and people behind the scenes at Victory Field. Now here's your host, the longtime broadcast voice of the Indians, Howard Kellman.
Hi everybody, and welcome to Inside the Indians. Neil Walker, former Indianapolis Indian, former big leaguer, our guest. We'll be back with Neil after these words. Walker is our guest today on Inside the Indians. Neil is a former Indianapolis Indian player, played with his hometown Pittsburgh Pirates and other teams, played 10 years in Major League Baseball. And this year, Neil is a broadcaster for the Pirates. He did a little bit of work last year in the booth, but doing many games this year. Neil, how are you?
I'm doing great, Howard. Great to hear from you. And hopefully all things are well there in Indianapolis.
Yes, the Indianapolis Indians are playing good baseball. And speaking of baseball, how are you enjoying, how are you finding broadcasting?
It's been good. Last year was kind of a little bit of a trial run for me. And going into this season, AT&T and the Pirates have done a great job kind of prepping me and letting me know what to kind of look for. And I was able to go down to spring training for a week and get to know maybe some names and some guys and prospects that wasn't totally familiar with. So it's been much more organic this year, much more fun to kind of be more involved in that capacity and learning the team and the pitching staff and the everyday guys and kind of all those things. So and I'm somewhat learning on the fly as far as all things involved with the production in a game and doing color, but I've really enjoyed it to this point. So I'm looking forward to the 25 plus more games I have this season.
Well, that's great. Well, when you talk about learning the team and those things, your brother-in-law Don Kelly is the bench coach, so that doesn't hurt.
Yeah, fortunately, I have some good intel from guys that I played against in the past, a few guys that I played with the Pirates, and just being recently removed from the game and knowing, like you said, the bench coach Don Kelly, I'm at least able to be privy to maybe some information that not a lot of people maybe would. Now, whether I use that information on air and publicly, that's another story. But it's been fun. Obviously, everybody involved in the Pittsburgh organization, we kind of know where the team is at the major league level, and you're privy to a lot of the prospects there in Indianapolis. So it's always good to, when I get texts from you and get some inside information on how things are going with some of the guys that are working their way towards Pittsburgh.
When you sit up in the broadcast booth, you're at press level. Doesn't the game look a lot easier to play than it actually is?
It does. Yeah. It looks slower. It looks easier. It doesn't look like the pitches are moving. It doesn't look like the pitchers are throwing as hard as they are. I have to remind myself each day in and day out how difficult the game really was. And, I feel like I had a good grasp of that concept and a perspective of baseball that, playing multiple positions, being an everyday guy, being in a small market, being in a large market, playing well, not playing well, all of those things combined have kind of led me to this point. And I think all of those things have ultimately helped me, like I said, have a better understanding for the game, but also now on this side as a broadcaster watching, certainly being a little bit more, I won't say forgiving, but understanding when things maybe don't go as you plan, because that's how baseball works.
You played for the Indianapolis Indians for several years before embarking on a 10-year Major League career. You may have been here longer than you had to be, but it really appeared to me as if you made the most of your time and you learned how to play the game properly, spending that time in the minor leagues.
Absolutely. I mean, my first go-around in Indianapolis was as a 21-year-old, and I moved up through the system pretty quickly, and that was really the first time where my eyes were really opened, and more so from the fact that there were a lot of guys going from the big leagues down to AAA, and I just got exposed, and I wasn't mentally quite ready for that. I was playing mainly third base when I got to Indianapolis, previously a few years earlier catching. And then my third go round in Indianapolis as a 24-year-old, I was playing multiple positions. I was playing really left field and first base on a nightly basis, and I was totally fine with that. And finally, that third year, it was really the second opening season with Indianapolis. Offensively, really, I took off, and that's when I caught my break and got an opportunity in May at a position that I certainly didn't think that I would ever hear my name playing, and that was obviously second base. So, but you're right. The things that I learned and the struggles that I went through, I am way more happy at the end of sitting here now at the end of my career and thinking back that I went through those in the minor leagues and in AAA, because a lot of times the game will tell you when you're ready, and not necessarily from a production standpoint, from your average or home runs or kind of, but your day-to-day, your at-bats, and how well you're handling the position or positions you're playing defensively. All those things are integral, because nowadays you're expected to be off into the races when you get to the major leagues, regardless of the situation that you're going into, whether the team is competitive or small market, large market, building, whatever that may be. You want as many ready players and guys that are able to, position players grasp their position for years to come, and pitchers to be able to get up there and to know exactly what they're doing and how to execute that.
You were Pittsburgh born and raised. Take us back to that day. I believe it's in 2004 when you were the Pirates' #1 draft pick.
Yeah, that was a special time. My senior year, I didn't really know what to expect. I knew that I wanted to play at the next level. I had signed a letter of intent to go to Clemson University, and I was, if I wasn't drafted really in the top 2 rounds, I was most likely going to go to college, and had a really good senior season in baseball. Was lucky enough to have a team like the Pirates right in my backyard to where they could come watch many, many games. Because as you know, in this part of the country, I think my senior year, we went to the fairly deep in the state playoffs, and we still only played maybe 22 games. So I had to play well. I had to do a lot of extra work for some of these guys before the game, after the game, batting practice, catch and throw to positions, take some ground balls at third base, all of that stuff. But, fast forward to draft day, I had a pretty good idea. There were 3 potential spots that I was going to land, and one was Baltimore, which was ahead of the Pirates. The Pirates were at 11, and the St. Louis Cardinals were at 15. So I had a pretty good idea that it was going to be one of those 3 teams. And when Baltimore passed on me, and Pittsburgh called me and said, "Hey, we're going to take you here," I was obviously thrilled, and couldn't have been happier with that. And could have been, more happy, especially for my family, to know, especially when I got to the big leagues, that they were going to be able to be in the stands for 75, 80% of the 81 home games a year. So really, really lucky, and had a lot of friends along the way, and a lot of good times, and a lot of bad times, but certainly a career that I'm proud of.
We'll have more with Neil Walker. This is Inside the Indians. Our guest on Inside the Indians. Neil, we talked about Pirates drafting you and how wonderful it was, not only for you and your family, since you're Pittsburgh born and bred. Tell us about the influence your dad had on your career, not only when you got to professional baseball, but as a youngster growing up. He pitched in the major leagues for 5 years.
Yeah, from a very young age, and I'm the youngest of four kids, an older sister and 2 older brothers, and the amount of knowledge that we were that he embarked on us at a young age was great. And obviously, like you said, he was a pitcher, and my one brother was a pitcher, so he got great advice and from a mechanical standpoint and pitching standpoint, all of those things. And my oldest brother ended up being an outfielder in the Detroit Tigers system, and like I mentioned before, as a high schooler, I was a catcher, and basically catcher and third baseman. So it was really good to at least have somewhat of an idea of what the college scene looked like, dealing with scouts, dealing with college coaches, dealing with potentially draft things. I have obviously many people that go through that system have no idea what to expect, and an agent or a advisor can tell you everything that you need to know, but until you're in it, you're not quite sure. And so when I was drafted by the Pirates, having somebody like my dad who knew how things were going to go, and the fact that really the minor leagues is not glamorous, it's hard work. It's a lot of time spent at the field. It's a lot of time spent away from your family. There's so many sacrifices that not just yourself makes, but your family makes to try to help you reach your dreams. So I was fortunate to have somebody that knew that. And the conversations that we would have really were less about baseball and more about, leadership and how to get the most of your talents and, focusing on things that you can control. And so I was one of the lucky ones that when I would have an 0 for 10 stretch or a 0 for 5 with 3 or 4 strikeout game, the conversations that I would have with my dad weren't ever like, what the heck, what's wrong with you? You're not seeing the ball? It was always, hey, are you doing your work? Are you preparing? Are you doing the things that you need to do? And so that was instilled in me at a very young age. And even to this day, that was probably the most valuable pieces of information that I had gotten about trusting the process and focusing on your work and preparing yourself day in and day out to be successful. Because that can get lost, especially in today's game with people chasing numbers and home runs and RBIs and kind of all of those things that go into the game of baseball today.
Most father-son combinations are a position player and a position player. In your case, it's your dad was a pitcher, you're a position player. Did your dad teach you and explain to you the way pitchers think?
Yeah, he as time went along, and obviously him pitching in the 70s was the pitching philosophies were a little bit different. Pitchers were going way further, longer in games. They had longer leashes. The bullpen guys weren't exactly these guys that were throwing 95 to 100. So a lot of things correlated with how he was, and a lot was more like, well, if you're a lefty hitter and I'm a righty pitcher, if I'm throwing you a slider, I'm going to try to make it look like a strike and fall out of the strike zone if I'm in a strikeout situation. If I'm trying to get a strike, obviously it's kind of the opposite. I wanted to make it look like a ball and then be a strike. So having some knowledge along those lines was very helpful for me at an early age. But at the end of the day, when you get between those lines and you get in the batter's box, a lot of that information kind of goes out the door, and you have to trust your process and your reactions and all of that. But I got to see several footages of my dad pitching, and I was definitely impressed. I don't think he could have got me out, Howard, but he was definitely impressed.
You told me you got your swing from your mom.
That's true. My mom was possibly the best athlete out of all of us. And when my dad got to the point where he had a hard time throwing batting practice because of just his shoulder getting beat up from so many years of throwing baseballs, she was the one that would pop in and her philosophy was simple: see it, hit it, swing as hard as you can. And so that's a pretty valuable piece of information too as a young hitter.
One thing your dad told me, and I really laughed about this, we'll go back to opening day 2009. You're playing third base for the Indianapolis Indians against the Toledo Mud Hens. Your brother-in-law, Donnie, is playing for Toledo. You make a terrific play, rob Donnie of a hit. Donnie makes an excellent play, rob you of a hit. And your dad, Tom, said to me the next day, look, I sat down with them and I said, neither of you guys is very smart.
Yeah, that scenario had happened a couple times. Once when I was with Indianapolis and he was with Toledo, and it actually happened. He robbed me. He didn't rob me, but he went way down the left field line on a foul ball that I hit at Tiger Stadium or at Comerica Park, and I'm just standing there in the batter's box like, come on, you could have let that drop in the foul territory. It would have meant nothing. But yeah, that is a true and funny story, and one that, looking back, we, having great stories to tell about playing with him and very short period of time in Indianapolis with him too. It's something that I cherish.
And then playing against him, because almost all of his time in the big leagues was with the Tigers. and the Pirates would invariably almost every year play the Tigers. So that had to be, because he's a Pittsburgh guy too. When the Tigers would come into Pittsburgh, you guys playing against one another.
Yeah. And the family was obviously torn, particularly my sister. So I think my parents had jerseys made that were half Pirates, half Tigers, half Milwaukee jerseys. So I appreciated their support and being on the fence per se and being politically correct. But the Tigers were, even though they were in a different league in the AL, they're considered the Pirates interplay rivals. So every year you play them 4 times, 2 there and 2 here, and even to this day that's how it works. So we knew that we were going to line up against each other for that, whatever that was, 2, 3, 4 year window, and each time it was always enjoyable.
We'll have a final segment with Neil Walker. This is Inside the Indians. Neil Walker, our guest on Inside the Indians. Neil, what are your thoughts when you look back to your 10-year Major League career?
I think the biggest thing that I take away from my career is being adaptable and being reliable and getting the most out of my abilities. Because as a high schooler, I figured, hey, I'm a catcher. I'm going to get to the big leagues as a catcher some way, somehow. I'm going to switch hit. I'm going to impact the game that way. And fast forward a couple years into pro ball, and I was asked to move to third base, and felt, hey, I think I can handle this because I've hit at every level, and I think that if I can play defensively, they're going to find a way to get me in the lineup. And then fast forward a couple years later, I'm playing third base in Indianapolis, and Pedro Alvarez is drafted by the team very, very high, and Jose Bautista is in the big leagues as a third baseman, and they had the catching position kind of locked up, and all of a sudden I'm sitting there in Altoona or Indianapolis, I should say, and thinking, oh man, I might have to switch positions again. So going into 2010 spring training, I've got 4 different gloves and playing all sorts of different positions, and so it was something that I had to accept and something that I had to believe that I could put the work in and become ultimately a good second baseman in Pittsburgh. But also if I was asked to do something else, which when I left Pittsburgh, ended up playing a lot of first base and third base and second base and even some outfield with the Yankees. And then moving on to Miami, playing mostly third base and first base. And so I never would have scripted kind of my path to my elongated big league career. But like I said, I found ways to stay in the lineup. I found ways to produce. I found ways to impact the game in different ways. And as I got older, I took it upon myself to try to be more of a sounding board for the young players and helping these guys nurture them into becoming big leaguers, because it's just a hard thing to do. It's easy to get to the big leagues, they say, but it's really hard to stay. So I found it to be that way. And I was fortunate that when I got up in 2010 in May, I stuck there for the rest of my career. So I think I'm more proud about kind of how it all came about and how my career evolved than anything else.
Growing up in Pittsburgh, you were well aware of the fact the Pirates hadn't made the postseason, hadn't had a winning record since 1992. Take us back to those years. It was 20 years later or so that the Pirates not only made it to the postseason, but did it 3 years in a row. Tell us about what that meant.
Yeah, I think when we got to 2012 spring training, we had players like myself and Andrew McCutchen, obviously, and Starling Marte and Polanco, I think was waiting in the wings. And we looked around and thought, hey, we have a pretty good team here. And we knew that it was going to be a tough division. St. Louis was always competitive. And Chicago was kind of at the peak of what they were doing at the time. So we knew looking around that we had the ability to do some damage and to be a really good team, and played some good baseball in 12. And then going into spring training 13, we all kind of looked around and said, this is our year. We know what we have here. We know what we need to do. We all have a job. We all have, the ability to get to the playoffs and do some damage. And that's exactly what happened. And, unfortunately, the wild card system in those 3 years was only kind to us that 1 year, obviously. But the teams that we had and the amount of games, I mean, we were pushing 100 wins for 3 straight years. That's not easy to do in any division. nonetheless the NL Central during that time. So we felt pretty proud about that process. And like I said, a lot of guys were internally, the Jordy Mercers, the Polancos, the myself, Andrew, Marte, all these guys were born and bred in the Pirates organization per se. So we took a lot of pride in that and playing Pirate baseball a certain way, and having that main focus day in and day out, be strictly focused on that day. What do we need to do to win? And we had everybody pulling in the right direction, and it was something special and something that I really had never experienced to that point, and probably was more of a bond than anywhere else that I had played in my career.
Neil, great spending time with you. Thank you so much.
All right, Howard, great chatting with you.
That's Neil Walker on Inside the Indians. Thanks to our guest, Neil Walker. See you next week on Inside the Indians.